So, welcome back to all of you. Welcome, Marion. We are very grateful and happy to have you here. I want very briefly to introduce you all, Marion Franklin, one of the very well-known authors. Marion Franklin is a master certified coach and also a mentor and a teacher. And of course, for those of you who are coaches, she is the author of the very popular book, must read for all the coaches, but not only. I would dare to say it's a leadership book as well, The Heart of a Laser-Focused Coaching. And also now Marion is focusing very much on mentor practicum groups. So for those of you who aspire to grow up in your career, you might consider to join Marion in a mentorship group. And of course, she had a quite a long journey in our professional field. She published also another book, Life's Little Lessons, Improve Your Life, One Lesson at a Time. And we invited her here for this last keynote speech to close our conference, a great today's conference. And I would not add more than that. I would just add that Marion is a great lover of bridge. She's playing bridge. And as she already shared, she's trying not to work anymore. So welcome, Marion. The floor is yours. We'll assist you during the session if you need anything from us. And let's enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patty. And thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, which, if you think about it, is the most phenomenal thing one could say, right? Knowing we are covering the whole world is just amazing. So I want you to imagine that every time you use the word coach, somebody says, "What sport are you coaching?" And that is literally what happened when coaching began, when nobody knew what do you mean you're a coach? What sport do you coach? Was just what everybody always said. And it was, in some ways annoying. And of course, it was very understandable. I mean, and then what do you say after that? So I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about how many coaches do you think that we know about were in the world in 1995? So I want you to think, at least 50, 100, 500, whatever you think may have been the number of coaches there were in the world. And you can put it in the chat if you'd like, or you can just think about a number, whichever works best for you, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So everybody kind of think of a number. I'm hoping. I can't see you right now, so I have to hope. All right. So I don't think did it come up in the chat? Oh, there it is. I see. Okay. Got it. Okay. So I think I only saw, yeah, it figures, Magda.
We have 300, 1,000, 100, 500, 20.
Okay,
500,
I see
50.
it now. I see the numbers. Okay.
It's a big range.
In 1995, there were 34 coaches that we know about in the world. And in 1998, when I joined ICF, I was number 848. And we thought, oh my God, coaching is really expanding. And now we have over 150 I mean, it's just amazing. Over 50,000 coaches in over 150 countries. So coaching really is growing up. So in keeping with our theme of the future of organizations, I like to also think about the future of coaching and coaching in organizations as well. And when we think about it, it's really very similar to a coaching conversation, because we're starting with the present. You know, somebody is telling us what's happening now and how they want to move toward the future. So what I thought might be more interesting than just talking about all the things from my book, which I will, of course, talk about some of them, but many of you have read the book, and rather than repeat things that you've read, I thought what might be interesting is to talk about what coaching was like back in the 90s, or in the early days, I want to say, and what it's become and where we might be going. And that's really what led me to writing the book and developing the whole laser-focused coaching methodology. Because I wanted to, and I think one of the reasons the book has become popular is because I'm giving you what coaching was meant to be from the start, how it was taught, how we learned it in the beginning, before it started taking on all the different versions, I want to say. So I will share certainly some of the skills and techniques and how I came up with them. But mainly, I really wanted to stay true to the heart of coaching the way that I know it. So back then, Thomas, and many of you may have heard the name Thomas J. Leonard. He was the founder of coaching as we know it today. Some people have no idea who he was, but I can say he was one of the most unique people on the planet. Aside from being absolutely brilliant, he was probably the most prolific person I ever have known, always sharing and giving and writing more and producing more. And back then he said, we only have two types of coaches. You're either a business coach or a personal coach. And I remember actually going up to him at a conference early on. And I said, well, you know, I know that you're saying we have business coaches and we have personal coaches, but if you think about it, isn't it always about people and their life? And so I want to really call it life coaching. Now, did I really start that term? Probably not, but it would be cool if it was me. But in any event, I really felt that life coaching really, whether you're in an organization, whether you're with an executive, it doesn't matter. It's still about somebody's life, even if it relates to work or relates to leadership, it doesn't matter. And back then, and so now, if you think about it, we had two ways to define a coach. It was either personal or business. Now we have executive coaching, ADHD coaching, grief coaching, performance coaching, health and wellness, and so on and so on. So we have really, really expanded. And just to give you an idea of what things were like, Thomas used to, about maybe once a month or so, he would open up his phone line for a few hours. And if you were lucky enough to reach him, you could ask him any question. And I remember finally one time reaching him. And I said, I really love teaching and mentoring, but I really also love coaching and just working with one-on-one. I'm not sure what to do. And he said to me, what makes you think you have to choose? And it was like, oh my God, that either or, how we get so stuck in that. And we don't realize that we can combine things. We have other options. And this is part of what we need to do as coaches, is to help people see that. We get so trapped in that either or mindset. So back then we had no models, no formulas. It was what we called pure coaching. It was transformational. And of course, now we have so many models. And in some ways, there are times where I feel coaching has become a little bit prescriptive. You have to get the agreement. You make sure you do this, make sure you do that. And I think it also now gets very often combined with consulting, which in and of itself wouldn't be a problem, except that I think very often coaches are not distinguishing. By the way, this is consulting now, I'm not coaching. That's a really important, I think, ethically thing to do, because it somehow now just sort of gets combined at times. And so this reminds me of a quote from John Wooden. And he said, "A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life." So if you think about it, if you're just a good coach, you're probably getting to some action step and the client has something to do and they can go off and have a nice week. If you're doing transformational coaching, you're changing the client is thinking and therefore changing their life, I would think. So one thing that's really interesting is that coaching used to be 30 minutes. So it didn't matter who you were, what you were, it was 30 minutes. And so when we got tested for the credential, we had to get on the phone with two assessors. One assessor was going to be the observer, and the other one was going to be the client. And they would do a little bit of chit chat to start, and then they would say, okay, go ahead. And you would have to start and ask, what is it that you want to focus on today, kind of thing. And the coach who was going to be the client would share, and you would ask your questions and go through the whole session. And then at 30 minutes, the observer would say, stop. And you could be in the middle of a sentence. You could be, oh, but I just want, no. It was 30 minutes, hard and fast. And I honestly believe that that's what helped so much to get all those competencies covered in that 30-minute period and go deep enough to change someone's thinking. I think that really helped for me to get into that laser-focused mindset. And of course, now you can do anything from 20 to 60 minutes. And I still say the sweet spot is probably no more than about 45. And I think that if you know that's your time frame, you can cover those competencies. So also back then, we only worked by telephone. Very few coaches did in person, very few. It was almost all just telephone because that's all we had. Now, of course, we have Zoom and most people are doing that. But I think the fact that we learned by telephone, we learned how to listen differently. There was no distraction. There was no looking at someone. There was no body language, but yet we learned how to listen for it. I could hear people thinking. I could hear people smiling. I could hear people getting sad without any words. That's how we had to learn to listen because we couldn't see the person. So then I think about those two questions that I have in the book that I think make such a difference. The first one, why is somebody telling me this? And if you think about it, like, why? Why did they mention that? What made them throw that little comment in? those little by the way comments, they matter. You know, when somebody says, oh, I had a terrible fight with my husband before I went to work, but I really need to talk about work today. You can't ignore that I had a little fight with my husband before I left for work. You can't ignore that. You have to address whether they want to go into it afterwards or not. That's fine. But it's up to you as the coach to question it. Wait a second. You know, you mentioned very briefly there that there was some turmoil that went on before you even came to work today. I'm wondering if that's impacting what's happening at work. At least you have to ask a question about it. And the other question, which quite honestly, I did not invent, I actually got it from Thomas Leonard. What's making this a problem for this person? So if you think about that question, it is so brilliant, because what makes it a problem for you, it wouldn't be a problem for the other person. Or what's making it a problem for your client, you're like, I don't know why that would be a problem. So that, just to hold that in mind, can create such amazing curiosity. Like, what makes this so challenging for this person? So we had a separate class just on learning reflection. And when I say reflection, especially after the opening story, and throughout the conversation, it's appropriate at times. But what happens so often, what I hear is the client shares their long opening story. And then I had to do this, and then this happened, and then blah, 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 and then she said this. And, you know, we get all those details. And then the coach says, so what is it that would really be helpful for us today? Or what do you want from this conversation, or something like that? There's no acknowledgement. You just shared a huge amount of information. So I am very big on reflecting, and again, not parroting, not repeating what they've said, and never, did I get that right? Oh, did I hear you? Yeah, you did hear. And if you got it right or wrong, who cares? They'll tell you if it's not right. So use the opportunity to go into a question that begins to move the conversation. And I talk about in the book the naked question. It's the question that just has nothing around it. So what was challenging? Versus, you know, I heard that this project was so challenging. What made it so challenging? It's so simple to do that, but it helps to create a way of asking the question that the client can then really give you an answer that makes sense and gives you better information. And Thomas Leonard had an expression, and I have to 100% agree with him. And that is, you never, ever need the backstory. And what that means is you never have to say, tell me more, because tell me more invites more story and more detail that we absolutely do not need. So I always say, just skip getting anything from any more detail, any more anything. The only exception is if somebody comes and it's only one sentence. I really am having trouble making decisions. Well, you know, what does that even mean? Might be my question, but I need something a little more. But anyway, we had a whole separate class in direct communication. And it was what Thomas Leonard called share what's there. And he said, coaches need to have the edge. And the edge meant that you had the willingness to share and say anything you want to say. But the key is how to do it without offending the client, without, creating a problem in the relationship. So, and now, unfortunately, it's sort of become, I want to say, absorbed into evokes awareness. And it doesn't, for me, I still say it should be its own competency, because it is so brilliant, because you as the coach would love to say things to your client and really say, oh, wait, that's a really nutty thing to think about doing, because that would be a disaster. You'd want to say that, but you can't. But yet, if you learn how to do direct communication, you could say that. When I listen to that, I think about other people who have tried something like that and it really hasn't had a good outcome, or, there are ways to do it. So anyway, so just think about for a second, if I say to you, all the coaches now that are listening to this, and I say to you, you could really improve your coaching. You could do a better job. And you would think, well, who are you to tell me? You first of all, you don't even know me. But also, you've never even heard me coach. Like, how dare you say something like that? But if I said, from my perspective, I think every coach could improve. What do you think about that? And you might say, oh, yeah, I agree with that. There's always room for improvement. I'm saying the exact same thing. But of course, the difference is how it gets said. And that's what makes direct communication so brilliant. You can say anything. So back in the early days, people would just wake up one day and say, oh, I want to be a coach. Or, oh, I lost my job. Oh, this coaching thing sounds cool. I'll do that. And we really didn't have a lot of regulation. We didn't really have a lot of rules. And ICF's definition of coaching was so wordy and long. And now we really have made it succinct. But I think the biggest difference is that now coaching in organizations is just common. Everybody knows that's something people do. Whereas back then it was an organization wants coaching. It just seemed so foreign. So I think we've really grown. All professions evolve and all professions grow, but I think coaching has really shown an amazing amount of change. And I remember we used to have to constantly help people distinguish between coaching and therapy, because they only knew therapy. What's this coaching thing? They knew how therapy worked, but they had no idea about coaching. So I still left the page up on my website, just kind of posterity, I guess, but on the distinctions between them. Nowadays, of course, I think everybody knows, but what's so amazing, especially for those people who were there in the early days, there was an article in Psychology Today by Dr. Altman, and she said, coaching is on par with therapy for most people. That statement to me was mind-blowing, considering how it used to be and how amazing that I mean, there are people who definitely need therapy, there's no question. But how amazing that a psychologist would say that coaching is now on par. And coaching now has become so much more than it was, because we have leadership coaching, we have improving work-life balance, we have developing the individual, developing more confidence. Those kinds of things didn't really show up in the beginning. It was more either life coaching, or it was very remedial. This person's really bad at their job, help them, or something. It just didn't really have all these possibilities that we have now. But something that has stayed the same is that coaching has been about community. And what I love to use the expression, create a supportive environment. In other words, we want to help anybody who comes to us, whether you're in HR or management, or it doesn't matter, coaching, anything. But when people come to us, we want to help them create an environment that supports them. And so that's one thing I think is really important in our coaching. So the expression laser coaching, that was around in the beginning. And of course, as soon as somebody heard laser coaching, the first thing that came to mind was, oh, 10-minute short sessions, quickie session, 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, but we're in and out, done, quick. And so when I was writing my book, I didn't want to use the term laser coaching, because I thought, who's going to buy a book that's about coaching in 15 minutes? So one of my former students actually was the person who suggested, what about laser focused? And I realized, oh, it's perfect. Now, what sets that laser focused coaching apart from other coaching is that we're looking for the truth. We're looking for what's really going on underneath, so we can help this person have a whole new perspective. And the irony in that is, because we're listening for the truth, because we're listening for what they think is true that really isn't true, the sessions can be shorter, because we can cover all of the competencies and go deep, and we don't need a huge amount of time. So what do we need as a coach to be really good coaches? And I want to say the first thing is a willingness to let go of everything. Let go of what you've learned. Let go of what you think. Let go of what you know. And just show up. Just be there, like a blank slate, waiting to be able to really listen to your clients. And I would also have to say that the expression, we've all heard it many times, and yet everybody kind of rolls their eyes, trust in the process. Well, what it really for me means, you have to trust yourself, you have to trust the client, but most importantly, you have to trust that no matter how the conversation is going or how it sounds, it will be okay. Because as soon as you don't think so, the coaching starts getting very icky. So trusting the process is allowing for flow. Just allow it to go wherever it's going to go, and you'll be okay. Now, it's really important as human beings, and especially as coaches or HR or wherever you are in your organizations, to be true to your own values. Now, you may not agree with your clients' values, and if they're really, really, really clashing, then you can't work with that client. You know, somebody wants to have an abortion and you are so anti-abortion, you can't work with that person. You just can't, because how could you be objective? But there are things clients do that may not be your style or you may not agree, but that doesn't mean you can't be true to yourself. And it's important to ask yourself those laser focused questions. So you hear a client struggling with something, and then you finish the conversation and you can say, well, where am I with that? What would I do with something like that? What are my values around that? So my journey is probably unique, but when I got my MCC, I had 654 training hours, which is insane if you think about it. But that's not what makes a coach great. What makes a coach great, in my opinion, is the self-development. What are you doing for yourself? How are you improving yourself? How can you get out of your own way and be comfortable with whatever clients bring to you? So one thing that I highly recommend is the School of Practical Philosophy. It used to be, it's all around the world, and it used to be only in person. But now, thankfully, because of the way the world is going, it's online. And so anyone can do it. And for me, it was a place to get spiritual grounding, but not in a woo-woo kind of way, just to really, really understand presence. And the other thing I always recommend for coaches is go to or find online 12-step programs. And the reason, and not that anyone has to go, or that anyone's an alcoholic or a gambler or a sex addict. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is going to some meetings or attending some online, you get to understand human behavior so much better. And as a coach or as an HR person or as a manager or whatever your position is, you definitely need to understand human behavior. And a lot of those life's little lessons, and I know many of you may have read them or listened to them, they're audio also, they come from the philosophy school, the School of Practical Philosophy, but also just from having gone to some 12-step meetings just to see what they're all about. And if you're going to go, to me, the one that makes the most sense, especially as a coach, is the Codependence Anonymous. And it's coda.org. And you can look it up online, because I think every person on the planet has pieces of codependence in them. It's that it has a range from healthy to unhealthy. And I think it's something that really addresses human behavior. So it's about the inner work, so that you don't have to perform coaching. It's not a performance. Once you've done your inner work, you can be comfortable with anything that shows up. So I just like to talk a little bit about some of the skills and techniques that I have in the book and how I came up with them. And I will allow, by the way, we'll have some time at the end for some questions. And I really hope you'll have some, because I love questions, and especially challenging ones. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the themes and how did I come up with that. So what happened, I think, for me was that after a period of time of coaching, I realized the story changes, the detail changes, but the basic theme is repeating over and over and over again. So the person feels like they're the victim. It's always somebody else's problem. Or somebody else did that, and I had no choice. What was I going to do? or the control perfection person, or the person who can never make a clear decision and always ambivalent about everything, or the person who constantly has to look out for everybody but themselves, the caretaker, right? The people pleaser. So I have invited, since I came up with these themes, and there are 25 of them, and since I came up with them, I have invited anybody who's ever read the book or listened to me talk, please, if you can come up with another theme that you think repeats in conversations that's not listed, I would love to know. I really think, ironically, that it kind of covers everything that could, as I say, the story, the words change, but the whole idea is just, it's just there. We even had a mentor call, I think it was this week, attached to the outcome. Somebody was so sure about how it had to be that they couldn't see that there were other possibilities because they were so attached to how it was going to be. So again, these themes just repeat. As I mentioned earlier, the by the way comments, the ones that just sound like, not really so much. But what happened for me was when I was learning how to coach back in the 90s, we were in person and we had to go off into another area and coach a person. And one was going to be the coach and one was going to be the client. And it was a group of us. And the woman that I got to be my client, I was going to be the coach and she was going to be the client, and her husband was in the group as well. And so she started by saying, I really like to talk about something going on with my marriage because it's really not very good right now, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea. And I said, maybe you have another topic, something else we could look at. And she did, and we coached. And then when we went back to process and go into the, everybody share, how was the experience kind of thing, I can't even begin to tell you how I got yelled at from the coach who was teaching the class because of my discomfort, my not wanting to talk about her marriage, knowing her husband was part of the group. It was her by the way comment in a way. It was really what she really wanted to talk about, but I couldn't handle it. So I kind of just moved it off. And I got into so much trouble for that. And so that's when it started to hit me that these little comments that people make, especially at the start, are so important. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about my absolute favorite thing in coaching, and that is silence. Because I have said over and over, and I still say over and over, I have never heard a coach leave enough silence. Never. If somebody listens to my conversations, a matter of fact, I was doing a presentation a few weeks ago for an ICF chapter, and I played a 30-minute coaching conversation, and I paused it, to have people ask questions and comment and so on. But no matter who listens to me coaching, the one thing that is so consistent is that people are blown away by how little I say and how much silence I leave. And why do I do that? Because people as human beings love to fill the silence. And I want the client to do it. I don't want to be the one to do it. So my rule is, even if you've answered, well, first of all, if I ask a question and the client says, oh, I don't know, most coaches will say, oh, well, let's be the, and no, I just stay quiet. Because there's no such thing as I don't know unless you've asked a straight up information question. How tall is the Empire State Building? Or, you know, some absolute fact question. They do know. Just give them the space. And just because they've answered your question, you ask some question and they give you an answer, it doesn't mean they're finished. I have had so many times where the client says, you know, and then, yeah, it was definitely, yeah, that was a good idea. And then I stay quiet, and all of a sudden I hear, you know what, I realize, and there's more that comes. So I always say, allow an extra 10 seconds, even when they're finished. Again, unless it's straight up information, which you shouldn't be asking anyway, but okay. I wanted to name my book, Don't Believe the Client. I was just so excited that I could have a chapter, Don't Believe the Client, but I really wanted to name the book that, but I knew nobody would ever buy that book. But the truth is, it is such an important thing to think about. It doesn't mean the client is lying. It doesn't mean that they're making it up. What it means is we can't accept what they're telling us at face value, because there's a chance that it's not the truth. So, you know, my classic example, my boss hates me. Well, he might hate you, but then again, he might not. He might be going through a terrible thing at home and taking it out on you. It may not be anything about how he feels about you. So whatever the client is telling us, we have to distinguish what is the fact and what is the perception. And I am here to say that 95% of what we would bring to a coach or a client brings to us is perception. It's how we see it through our filter. It doesn't mean it's the truth. So I always say, no matter what, be skeptical. And if you feel satisfied with the answer you get, that, yeah, that does seem to be the truth, then move on. But so often you're going to hear, oh, wait a second, that's not really what it's about. And that's what's so important. One of my favorite questions that I got from the School of Practical Philosophy was about a wise person. What would a wise person do? And that question works so well, so often, because it takes people completely out of their thinking and puts them into a different mindset. So I would like you, well, let me first, I'm sorry, I have about the shift, I have two quotes that I think would be really important. One is by Henry Cloud. We change our behavior when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. Consequences give us the pain that motivates us to change. And I think that's why I'm so big on get to that pain point. And the other one by Melody Beattie, it's what we believe is true that isn't, that does the damage. And that's what clients bring to us, what they think is true. So I'd like you to think about your experiences in your life and what you've realized and ways that you might be able to help your clients. And I want you to keep in mind that people need to be heard and understood. And David Augsburger's quote, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are indistinguishable. And so just as we used to have things in the olden days like you pick up your telephone and there was really an operator, or you go to the bank and there was actually a teller, you didn't have an ATM machine. If we look back at coaching over these last 30 or so years, we see this dramatic change in what's happened. And I'm guessing that in another 30 years, when people look back at what we're doing now, they may feel the same way. However, as long as there are human beings, there is one thing that we can't replace, and that is human connection. The foundation of coaching has always been and will always continue to be connection. So, thank you. And I know that we're probably on time. Is that right? We're kind of, yeah. And I have to say, well, never mind. That would be about me, and obviously that's not important. So if we could just take a couple of minutes just for some questions. And here's the deal. If I don't get to your question, and I'm sure obviously I won't get to everybody's question, then what I'd like you to do is go to my website, lifecoachinggroup.com, and use the contact form and send me your question, and I'll be happy to answer it, because I hate leaving people, kind of up in the air. So,
thank you so much. I am speechless, and I was listening to you with all my heart. And we have a question here.
Yeah.
How do we get into the flow of the conversation and keep enough silence while also keeping it at 45 minutes?
Well, I think the easiest thing, Diana, what you can do is send me the message through my form, and I'm going to send you that 30-minute coaching conversation, and you're going to hear how it works in real time. It's a mindset. You really don't, and the conversation really was 30 minutes. It went so deep, and there was so much silence. So it does work, but for me to explain it now might be a little tricky. So I will send you the recording. Okay. So
what do you do when you hit the I don't know part?
Oh, well, first you stay quiet. That's the first thing. Then what I like to say after some time, if there really is, nothing, I like to say, what do you think might help you to know? That's the question I really do prefer. Okay, I totally agree, phone. We're listening much better at different levels. I had the experience, people around the room. So okay. I used what if you knew. Okay, good. And then did it work or not, Diana? And if you would know, what would you say? Well, I wouldn't even say, what would you say? I would just leave it as, well, if you did know, what would help you to know? And then depending on what it is, you might, what would help you to know what would work best, or whatever, depending on the context. But I just think and then they could still say, I really don't know. And then you can say, all right, well, you've mentioned, and then talk about something they've said before you got to this question that they don't know. And then you could ask, and sometimes, and then you can ask them a question about something they've said that'll probably trigger them to move on. But the other thing I have said to people is, I hear that you're saying I don't know, but quite honestly, I think you do. What's really going on here? Because so often people don't want to answer the question because it's too hard, or it's embarrassing, or it's shameful, or something like that. So I never give up on I don't know. All right. What do you know? A good question. Or is it judgmental? Well, it depends on how. I would need some context, Celia, on how you would mean that. what do you know is a little derogatory. It's almost like saying, like, what do you know anyway, or it could be taken all different ways. So I would say no. What would be the thing that helped you the most in the School of Practical Philosophy? Learning how to be present, really learning how to just be, and to be of service. Literally, how to be of service is what I learned, and how to be there for other people in a way that I probably would not have otherwise ever figured out. Okay. Who would know? I don't like that question because I don't like to bring in other people. Again, unless it's a fact. If you need an answer to a fact, then yeah, who would be helpful for you, or what book might help, or what movie might help? Yeah. But you don't want to ask questions about facts. You want to ask questions. You see, you're asking about them. How could they not know about their own life? They're the only ones who could know. But they don't want to just come out with it quickly. Okay, what do we say after we say hello? And I'm not referring to what would you like to get from this conversation. So I pick up the phone, hi, this is Marion. Hi, this is, Magda. And I say, and Magda says, how are you? And I say, oh, I'm just fine. And you? And she says, oh, I'm good. I'm okay today. And I said, oh, well, it sounds like there's something going on. So what is it that we can look at? So you have to pick up on how they do that piece. So if they say, oh, yeah, I'm really great. Oh, well, it sounds like things might be going well. What's going on that we can talk about? Do you see what I'm saying? You've got to use that little chit chat that starts is part of your context. Okay. Oh dear. It happened to you to have a session where the client wasn't very communicative for different reasons, and leaving the silence at the end, she didn't really get anywhere. Okay. So I think part of that is to figure out what's making them not communicative. So instead of getting frustrated, I might say, when I notice that so often when there's a question, there just doesn't seem to really be an answer that I can, really understand. So I'm just wondering what's going on here. That's the direct communication piece. Really like call them out on it if they're not communicating. Make them justify why they're not giving you answers. The silence only works when because they should be thinking, which means that your question didn't provoke them to think in a way that they needed to. How are you improving yourself? And if you share your reflective practices, I'm going to say coaching myself, of course, but noticing things. So for example, I have a to-do list, right? And I say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to quickly do my words with, oh, Marion, look at that. You're distracting yourself because you don't want to really go there. So it's this awareness. It's noticing what you do. Magda, you're bouncing there. Sorry. Maddie, I'm sorry. So it's noticing a lot about yourself, how you're responding, what happens with your clients, and what are you doing because of what's happened with them. Okay. When you feel they are bringing, oops, I lost that one. Hold on one second. When you feel they are bringing in the conversation a lot of details about the context of a situation, what do you do? Is it okay to interrupt? Not the opening story, but after that, anytime, yes. You say the name of the person first. You have to start with the name of the person. So, Anka, let me just stop you for a moment because I'm hearing something really important in there. And I'm wondering, blah, 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 blah. Or, Anka, let me just stop you for a second. Because I'm hearing a lot about the groceries that you bought and how hard it was at the grocery store. And I'm wondering, and then my question. So what I'm doing there is start with the person's name, because it gets that person's attention instantly. Tell them why you're interrupting, so to speak, the fact that you are, why you're doing it. But most importantly, reflect, no matter how garbagey their stuff has been, no matter how irrelevant, no matter how stupid, doesn't matter. Reflect what you've heard. I hear that buying the groceries was really hard. Who cares, right? But I can hear that buying the groceries was really hard. And I'm wondering, and now I'm going to start to move the conversation to where it needs to go. So you have to acknowledge, even if it's yucky detail stuff. So, how we use it really for a topic? I'm not sure. When do you feel they are bringing in the conversation? Oh, that, okay. What is the real role of empathy and sympathy in a coaching session? Probably asking the wrong person, because I'm the most linear person there is. But I would say it depends on it really does depend on the situation. Too much sympathy, it doesn't make sense, because then you're right in it with them. Empathy is that you're understanding, but you're not getting sucked in. So, I can hear how hard that must have been for you. That to me is empathy. I'm understanding you. Versus, oh gosh, that sounds awful. That is not the coach's role. Okay, I hope that helps. Okay, let's see. How do you not influence the outcome based on your own view on what is good for the client? Oh, that's so funny, because that happens a lot, right? We have an idea of what we would do or what we would want or how we would want it to go, but they have something different. And that's where the School of Practical Philosophy helped me, because I realized this is them, this is me, and this is their journey, and it's their life. And I am not the person to control what happens in their life. And I have to let it go. Even if I think it's the craziest choice, it's their choice. It's their life. And ironically, in the end, maybe it was the right thing, and maybe I would have been wrong. So I never, as the coach, want the responsibility of telling someone, here's what I would do, because I am so great at this. It wouldn't be, that would be completely inappropriate. So go live your life, do it your way, and whatever happens, happens. I can't control it.
Marion,
anything, can you recommend
there
some
are flows and flows of thank you and gratitude. And
yes, and also somebody on direct communication. In my book, yeah, I really have a whole chapter on that. Okay. And yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I'm thanking you because you were listening to me babble for a long time there. And I really wanted to make it interactive. But on the other hand, I just thought, let me just give you some history and see how, something different than just saying stuff from my book. So I'm hoping it worked. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you for all of these wonderful people who helped to put this together.
Yes, and I am really grateful. Over 100 people truly passionate about what we do and what we are as coaches. And thank you for the great learning and wisdom. And that's a very good moment for us to thank also to all the volunteers who contributed. I want especially to thank today to all my colleagues who have been moderators and technical staff, and to Alex and Claudio who put everything together. Technically speaking, it was an architecture of coordination and collaboration, and it worked, and thank you all. So those of you who want to spend 10 more minutes and no more with us, the volunteers, just to close, and maybe you have some questions, or to express some of your feedback or expectations, you may join us. We'll be here 10 more minutes.